Hey, Mr. Mayor, we are live and ready when you are.
Okay, great. All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Seldovia City Council, Monday, October 28th, 2024. Time is 4:34 p.m. and this is a work session. We have a couple items on the docket tonight for discussion. The first one's the 2025-2030 draft capital improvement plan for FY26 state and FY26 for the federal legislative capital priority requests. And then the second item tonight is going to be the CBDDG or the Community Development Block Grant discussion. And then just let the record reflect, we do have members Kennedy, Rojas, Langbart, Payton, and Keith Lee in attendance tonight. And I'll go ahead and let either Liz or Heidi, whoever wants to take it away.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I did not have the time to make all the amendments and update the CIP from our last discussion, and I didn't include it in this packet. It's still the same draft from last packet. Hopefully you guys all have access to it. We do have a couple of copies here in the room if anybody needs to see them. But hopefully you remember what's going on from there, or have access as we talk about this, well, both topics really. But starting off with, now that we have the projects listed and prioritized, I did provide the table of contents with those projects on page 8 and 9, just for reference. The enhancing Seldovia's value added building and waterfront lot is highlighted at a 4 because I don't know, I can't remember if we actually touched base on that being the priority level or if it needs to change. If you guys think it needs to change, let me know. Otherwise, it will remain at a 4. And then, but the focus of the discussion is, what are those state and federal capital priority requests that the council desires be submitted this coming year? So last year, you'll see on the memo on page 3, a little bit of background for FY24. We submitted the raw water transmission line replacement project, Block Street sewer main replacement, fuel retail and distribution facility roof improvements, material for safe roads project, planning Seldovia small boat harbor improvements project. And we were successful with 2. They happen to be both be match projects or match funding for those projects where we had already received funding through federal appropriations, and that was the raw water transmission line replacement project for $250,000 and material for Seldovia safe roads projects for $88,000. So I do think that's a something to consider when we're asking for requests, if there's already funding available and if it's a match. That may or may not up the chances of it being included as an appropriation. I also included on page 6 and 7 a list of past requests from FY13. So that's FY13 through FY24. We were not very successful most years. I mean, FY22, we received 2. I also think that our visit to Juneau and January, February time was helpful and part of that. So if we're really serious about projects, that's something to look forward to in the budget at and consider as traveling out for them and lobbying ourselves. And then if you look back on this list, I think the last time we received an award, let's see, I had it marked, and FY14 with the smolt stocking. So, and then and the industrial building was around that time as well. So it'd been a while since the city had received any sort of appropriation on the state level, and that's just another consideration as we request funding. We've tried a few different. Just a few different ways of going about it. This last year, we also didn't put a priority level. So that didn't seem to make a difference that they were all a priority. And I've seen some other communities do that. For those project considerations, really anything in the CIP is an option. But I did pull out some of the ones that don't already have funding sources or that are just a little bit more prepared. A couple of them don't have a requested figure, but that could be found if needed. And they're in no particular order of importance on the memo, but just to list off those projects, for instance, is the energy improvements, fuel retail and distribution facility project. That's for SFL. The multipurpose building maintenance and energy efficiency improvement project. Equipment is an allowable request. So I did put the skid steer and the vacuum truck on there as a consideration. I did not include the backhoe because I believe that's still wrapped up and involved with the AML bundled request for federal appropriations. The historic boardwalk repair and improvement, we have a recent quote for that. Seldovia 10-year collaborative economic strategy plan, the comprehensive plan and zoning code update and review. We know those are around about 360,000. And that was just recently bumped up in priority level per the last work session. And then this one, which is probably a pretty valuable consideration. And speaking with Moffitt and Nickel, we just last week received an updated probable cost estimate, and that is included in this packet. If you look at opinion of probable construction cost breakdown starting on page 11, you can see that on page 12, we have a potential funding gap with the minimum funding or with the minimal probable cost, which would be 15% of what they're figuring. It'd be a funding gap of $54,653. Mid-range is $454,273, and maximum is $987,000. $987,999. Sorry, stumbling there. These, I haven't gotten too excited about them yet because there's a lot of variables that are being considered, and most of it has to do with mobilization and demobilization, and going with worst case scenario that nobody's in the area, and that those costs would be increased because of it, as well as we've had some discussions about the city being able to demolish the dock ourselves versus hiring out, or at least offering that as an option for people, to come and grab sections of the dock as we dismantle it. So there are some variables that can help bring that cost down, but putting that out there as an option that we know that potentially this project could cost a little bit more than initially anticipated, as all projects seem. That could be an option, especially because it does already have funding for it. It would be a match project, and that higher amount of 987, or you could go with the middle amount. So those are just some ideas. Other considerations are planning projects, as in the harbor improvement project, RV park improvement project, boatyard, professional housing feasibility study was discussed at the last meeting. We did include harbor planning in the FY24 request. And I wanted to just note real quickly that I didn't include any water and sewer projects in this memo, simply because we are working towards funding for the majority of those projects. However, Block Street sewer main replacement was included as a request in FY23 and FY24. And leave it to council for feedback or questions, discussion, however I can help support you guys in this discussion. Oh, one last thing, page 4 and 5 is the capital budget information from the website of what is included in the capital appropriations bill and what the process is. So that's just it provides a little more information reference point as we work through this discussion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, thanks, Heidi. Hey, real quick, if you jump back to the document on the opinion of probable construction cost, can you real quick, and that's on page 12, Can you walk me through that? So you've got a minimum scenario is minimum minus 15 and then a maximum of plus 20. So are you saying that if we yeah, what is that? I'm not understanding that column there, the minus 15 and how that equates to the funding get. There's three. You got a totals column on top, and then you've got the minimum and maximum underneath that.
Mhm.
I'm not following that table.
Yes, so those are for contingencies, or there's a better word for it that's not coming to the top of my head, but if you're looking at what the probable cost will be for the dock, and then that it potentially could become under 15% or over 20%. That's their allowance for cost difference.
So yeah, no, I understand that, but you're saying a minimum of so we had the total amount that we had appropriated was what for this or allocated for this project?
It is 2,000, or sorry, $2,516,646.
Okay, so if we're saying we're 15% under that, okay, so that's so if we're saying we're 15% of what? And then I mean, if you look all the way over to the right, there's a funding gap of 54,000.
Yes, because they're saying that the total project cost would be $2,571,299. Total project cost is that middle line. It's broken out by total construction, construction administration, M&N design, and then total project cost versus what the funding is. That fifth column stays the same at the $2,516,646. And then that far column is the difference between those previous two columns.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not tracking on the minus 15, what that's applied to where you get. I mean, it seems to me that if you have a negative, yeah, I get the range there, but if you're going to have, if the maximum of 20% implies an overrun of 20% on the project, then yeah, and if you had 2.5, yeah, then yeah, if you had 2.5, and then if you had a 20% overage, I mean, that would seem like that would be another 500. But then this is showing almost a million. I guess that's with, you've got the design in there. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I haven't studied this table. I'll have to look at this a little more. I don't like the way that's laid out, but I'll figure that out. But either way,
okay.
so it looks like the bottom line is I mean, is what you're saying is we're going to be short regardless here.
I'm saying we're really close. And
Okay.
we've seen how these projects go, especially when you're really close. There typically tends to be some overages. And we are trying, and in our discussions, we remain very cognizant of trying to keep it as minimal as possible and within the budget. But with recent cost figures and industry standards, the estimate for the project is that it'll be that 2.9 is like the middle mark, which is a $454,273 difference. It could go up from there, and that's where they're saying really on the high end it would be potentially that 987,000. But regardless, it'll probably come in a little bit over what we initially budgeted, and that's that 54,000. Regardless.
Okay, yeah, and I know we talked extensively about that when we had originally requested our funding, and I think we had every bit of 20% built into that, the original numbers, and then we put a contingency on there of 20% for escalation, et cetera. So yeah, hard to say right now, but at the end of the day, it's probably, yeah, if anything, it's going to go up. It's not going to go down.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. We'll go ahead and open it up to council. If anyone's got any thoughts, comments on the projects that were just outlined. And then keep in mind, this is for the state appropriation. at this time.
Federal, they could be split up if you want, but
Either one,
we,
okay.
yeah. So you can split them in. So some are state and some are federal, but last year we utilized both or we utilized the list for both. And we were successful with the state. We did have the fuel improvement project did move forward for the federal requests last year, but because of the category of the grant being a USDA, that's unfortunately the most sought after category for building improvements and facility improvements and such. And it's the most sought after category where they receive the most project requests and it has the least funding. Go figure. So that one didn't end up making through. But Senator Murkowski was supportive of it and she did push it into committee. So that might be an option again for this year, is to again push forward that energy improvements project as an idea. But yes, we potentially would submit them for both state and federal appropriations, unless you guys want to separate them.
Just like we did on page 3 there for both for last year. Okay. All right, sounds good. I'll go ahead and open it up. Any questions, comments from council?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Heidi, so for these grants, are we looking at needing matching funds?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
However, I did want to point out that the grants that we did receive, the awards that we did receive, they were matching funds.
For another
project,
grant, yes. And so as we're looking at this list, at least from history or different allotted amounts in these categories, are there any other considerations we should know of, like what's more likely to get funded than others as we strategize?
Not that I know off the top of my head. I haven't heard anything yet for this year. It really just depends on, I mean, the session, they're not in session yet. So there hasn't been a lot of talk about what the focus will be.
Okay. And then how many projects are you guys looking at wanting us to ask for?
Through the mayor, that's an excellent question. We've tried a few different strategies where we only did a few. FY22, they told us submit them all. FY23, very similar. We submitted a lot. FY24, not as many. FY20, we only did one. That was the new road grader. We've tried a few different strategies. It seems like it could be beneficial if you just really nail down the top 4 or 5. Look at the list and just see what the real priorities are, and then submit those moving forward.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, I would agree with what was just discussed. I think in the past, I know we thought that it's better to narrow down what our priorities are and not have a grand list. So I would encourage us to do just that, narrow it down to what our wish list is and hopefully get some funding. And I agree with going for the state and the feds with this program of trying to get funding. Could I get a little sense of what we're looking for? I might have missed it in the opening. What we're trying to accomplish this evening. Having the discussion, I understand, but what is it? What are we trying to accomplish in steps?
I think you guys want the list, correct, Heidi? You want the list of the projects so that you can start preparing those applications and get them submitted.
Well, yes, we need to prepare a resolution that adopts the CIP, and we would like to include along with that the list of what those priority requests are, and then make sure that our one-page sheets are really defined well for those projects. And so that as soon as that CAPSIS period opens for the state and as well as for Murkowski and Patola, that we can submit projects on time and not be behind. So yes, the hope is that the council can come to a conclusion of what types of projects, which projects you would like submitted for capital requests. funding.
So, and if we look at all the projects, if we go back to page 3 there, where we had the background from everything from last year, and then we had gotten the 250 for the additional 250 for the raw water transmission line, the 88 for the safe roads, and then underneath that we've got the additional 6 or 7 projects listed there. And then, of course, there's the whole plethora of anything else that anyone thinks in the CIP. I mean, there's a couple of these that I would think definitely some of the carryovers, the planning for the Seldovia small boat harbor improvements. I don't know if 25 grand is going to get us very far. I could see that one maybe up into 50 grand or something. Let's see, the fuel retail and distribution improvements that, I mean, so last year we had put in for 136 and now we're looking at about 900, just under 900 all in to get everything fixed on that. And we've got that listed as a priority 1. We know that's a big deal. And then we've got, we have the skid steer on there. So, I mean, I think any number of these could easily flow over to augment, anything that we didn't get last year and make it, fairly simple for someone looking at it. I mean, all of our needs seem pretty straightforward, and there's really no big fluffy stuff on there. If you're looking at it as a legislator or, a representative or senator, and you're going through it, the fluffy stuff to me would seem like, any big pipe dream stuff would be tough when you're comparing this to other communities where they've got, very specific needs, just to keep the community, just to keep their infrastructure moving forward.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
Could I get clarification on page 3? I believe it's page 3. Page 3 where we have listed the energy improvements, fuel rental and distribution facility and such. What is that towards the end? What is that $360,000? Is that comprehensive plan and zoning code update and review? Is that $360,000 there?
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Wow. Okay. We've got that priority too.
Yeah, I mean, so Heidi, let me just follow up. They can, so when we submit this, just like last year, they can pick and choose whatever they want to on that list, whether it's got a priority level or not.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may clarify, I am not recommending or suggesting that you guys have to submit all these projects. These
Correct.
are just the ones that if you go through the packet and you can see how developed they are, most of them have budgets, or they would be easy to put a budget together, that are more at the final stage for a request. You can take a couple or none of them, or all of them if you really want to off the list. But I'm in no way suggesting or recommending that all of these projects should go. Just trying to provide a comprehensive overview of what could go.
Yeah, so remind me now, on the Block Street sewer main, we don't have funding for that because we consolidated and put all of our money towards raw water, correct?
We do not have construction funding for it. However, we also do not have engineer and design for it. And there is a planning grant through VSW that would cover Block Street and provide that design and plan for it if you guys want to hold off and wait and go that route. But I know it was still included last year, knowing that it is a pressing priority. And if that's something you guys want to continue to put forward, absolutely, we can do that. I just, in this list, hadn't initially put it on there because I didn't include projects that already have potential funding. And that is one that is a ways down the road, but potentially it will continue to work its way up to the forefront.
Well, me personally, I think we should leave that on there, because if it becomes a catastrophic problem, then it's going to be we're going to need to find funding real fast for that. So, I mean, again, maybe there's a chance that someone takes a look at that and says, hey, we can fund that. Then great. I don't know if you want to back out the planning monies or how you want to do that, but I myself would be in favor of leaving that one on there. Obviously leaving the planning for the small boat harbor improvements, get rid of everything that we've already been awarded on those. So that leaves us 2 out of the 5. Let me see, 1, 2, fuel retail. So there's fuel retail, block sewer. Yeah, so that would leave 3: block sewer, fuel retail, and planning on the 3 out of the 5 that we didn't get previous funding for from last year. Upgrading the amount from the 136 probably up to the 890 level or somewhere around there that you've got for the energy improvements for the fuel retail and distribution.
Yes, we can do that. And they can choose to fund a portion of it or not, or all of it. I mean, that's what we
Right.
saw them do with the raw water transmission line. So if you ask for the majority or the entirety of the project and then they don't fund all of it, at least it's a start they can pick.
Right.
Mayor?
I think we've been looking at some other funding for the multi-purpose building and energy efficiency improvements. I would be in favor of putting the skid steer up there. And let's see, we already got Jackaloff. I mean, I don't know at this point, is this the place to put additional gap funding in that request, or what's your thoughts on that for Jackaloff? When we don't even know really yet, when we don't have anything solid.
I would say that it looks like we're at least going to have a portion of that funding gap. And if there was a desire to go for the middle ground of that $454,273, it would give us a little nice nest egg that we weren't sweating as we went to put the project out there. That would be my recommendation.
Well, then we should probably look at doing that, because if we don't and we come up short, we're going to be screwed.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yep.
I want to agree with that. My brain was kind of turning at looking, as you were looking at last year and starting from there, but then kind of looking at places to where we don't have to look into our own budget as we're doing projects, kind of trying to strategize that way, since we're getting in a good place with our budget, so that we don't maybe have to start dipping into the excess funds and start to build those funds up. And so I agree with having that gap funding so that we're ready, since we know that's probably going to be needed. And so we could potentially not be in a situation of needing those funds. And then also kind of working backwards here, since we haven't talked about the CDBG grant yet, I think whichever project we choose for that should be on this list for the match. And we should, instead of trying to do both, and even though it would be great, I think that would be better, so that then we're not having to find funds for that whichever project we decide. It would be just taken care of. So those are my recommendations.
Yeah, that seems to make sense. And Heidi, I would say jump in if if there's something that's going on here that you think would be more appropriate for the CBDG grant.
No, we haven't had that discussion yet, but that was one thing I believe I put on the list of considerations is potentially even waiting and not applying for it this year until we find that match funding, or that's something we can apply and say we have requested match funding and hope we'll receive it or we'll continue to seek it. But I believe in that application, they really want you to define where it's at first. So it could be these funds typically last for a couple of years. So it might be, if you look at chicken and egg and you want to make that determination, if you pick a project and say, we really want to go for this next year, but we're going to do our best to find the match funding this year beforehand. Or you know, if you have an appetite for a little bit of risk and just going for it regardless. And we'll have a few options to discuss where that funding could come from. But certainly putting in that match funding as a request is a viable option.
Gotcha. John, you had your hand up. Did you want to chime in with something?
I just wondered if anybody had a chance to look at pages 17 through 19, the estimates from Moffett. To me, some of them are kind of alarming, and I realize we might need to have some, some gap funding, but when we originally talked about doing this dock, we were half the money where we're at now, and they've got $100,000 on that estimate just to demolish the dock. Did you see that? And
Yeah.
so I guess the point I'm making is I think it's going to be really important for us to really sharpen our pencils and really watch and make some decisions maybe along the way. I don't know how much of that we can do, but to prevent us from ending up being, 400,000 or 500,000 in the hole on that. I mean, it could end up bad for all of us,
He did not know what was on his birthday.
Yeah, no question. No question. When that starts, when we do get we'll know, there'll be a couple things that will probably be some variables, but once we get into the construction stage of this and we start getting our actual cost estimates in, we should have a pretty good tight idea of where we're going to be at before we even get the first materials ordered.
And then the other thing is they got $100,000 on there just to install the floats. I mean, that seems to me like an awful lot. I realize that prevailing wages are a lot, but
Are you kidding?
Yeah. I mean, I know it goes quick when if you've got a 6 or 8 man crew and you're there a week. I mean, it doesn't take long. Yeah, the actual float piece, but yeah, there's probably some wiggle here and there, but we'll suck up every bit of this, I'm sure.
oh yeah, it just really makes me nervous. Anyway, that's all.
Yep. Okay, thanks, John.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I'm good.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just one last thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
I would agree that putting the important infrastructure that we got with our water and sewer is really important. So moving Block Street down into the list for this year. Did I hear the raw water transmission line replacement would also continue in the request for this year?
I think we're covered on the raw water now, right, Heidi?
Correct. Raw water is covered. So, but you said to include Block Street, correct?
Yes, Block Street.
I would agree. And then also what Ashley said about making sure if we're putting requests in there that we try to cover our funds that we may not have in the future. Yeah, so I would agree with what's been said so far about how to rework this and have the fund requests reflect our infrastructure, what we need to keep our pipes going is a top priority. And then finding money perhaps that'll cover us when the project come in, or matching funds would be a good thing to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Vivian.
And I'm sorry, I apologize, Mr. Mayor. I'm just remembering, I think I had that thought about the CDBG and I misspoke. I believe we can't use state funds to match state funds for the CDBG, but I'll have to double check.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's why I didn't include that on the request, but I'll double check and get back to you guys about that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so that would give us 3. What's that end up giving us? 4. That gives us 4.
6.
Does it still leave us with 6?
Yep. Oh, well, no, sorry, if not, without the CDBG, 5. So you said skid steer, Jackloff Bay dock, Block Street, fuel retail and distribution facility improvements, which is now the energy improvements project, and planning for Seldovia small boat harbor is what I heard.
Yes. Yeah, I'm really not in favor right now of putting anything on for the comp plan or the zoning update and review with that package. I think we'll have some additional time to work through that, given that our comp plan is only 10 years old, but that will have to be a consideration here at some point moving forward. Any other thoughts from anyone else on other projects they'd like to see added on to for FY25?
Heidi, does that mean, because these are requests for state and federal funds, so does that mean that we wouldn't be able to ask for federal funds as matching funds for the CDBG?
I will double check on that one as well. And I'll get back to you.
Hey Heidi, what would be the plan that you come back at the next meeting with the updated list and everything, or what do you after tonight's meeting, what would be the next step on those?
So if that's a fairly thought out list, and of course it can change, what we can do is bring it back at the next meeting as a resolution, and you can still have the discussion. You can change things on the resolution. We've presented blank resolutions and worked off of them during a meeting, but it'll give you kind of an idea, and you can see them in front of you with the CIP. And of course, if you guys want to postpone it and continue to have those discussions, but it'll be as finalized up to this point as it can be. If you're ready to pass it and approve it, that's great, and we'll move forward with whatever those top projects are. But that would be how I would envision, is that we would just bring it forward as a resolution unless you want to have another work session.
Okay, no, I think we can bring it forward as a resolution, and then if there's any, last minute hammer out we got to do, we can just do it in the meeting.
Okay, that sounds great. I think I have great direction on that with those 5 projects.
Okay. And then we've got the next piece. Did anyone else, one more chance here? Anything that, I know we're moving quickly here. If someone's got something, just by all means, jump in. Okay, I think we're fairly consistent where we've been. So we've had a little luck last year, so we'll see how it goes. All right, do we want to move on to the next item, which is the CBDG project discussion? Are you going to lead that one, or Liz? Or are we frozen?
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize my mic was not on.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to move forward in the packet to page 26, you'll see a memo about the discussion we've held so far on the CDBG and the request to look into match funding options for that 25% match. There is a summary that discusses that this application period closes December 6th, and that it was requested at the previous discussion that we bring back revised budget narratives for the multipurpose building, energy improvements project, and the energy improvements fuel retail and distribution facilities. So those are attached. Additionally, discussion was held on the recommendation for a 25% match, and I was directed to evaluate and present on those funding options. I did want to note that when we received an award in FY 2022, the CDB match that the city put forward was 3% instead of the full 25%. However, that was coronavirus funding specific. So I think there was a little bit more funding availability through that program. But just pointing out that the 25% match is a recommendation for full points, but not necessarily requirements. I think there's a little wiggle room. You just get better points the more of it you have. So looking at those matching fund considerations, I provided a list of options and related to our current status. And the first one, as we discussed at the meeting last Wednesday, as that depending on the nature and cost of the project could be broken into smaller, more affordable phases for this funding cycle. For instance, the energy improvements project for the fuel and lube could focus on roof repairs, or the multipurpose building could focus on siding. And those are just examples. That doesn't have to be those don't have to be the projects that are pushed forward. Some other options for that match funding is that the city of Seldovia does receive community assistance program, a program payment annually from the state. This used to be called state revenue sharing, and a few years back was changed to the community assistance program. We've been cautioned for many years that this is a program that the city should stop relying on, and we've been working towards that. In fact, in our budget, we're seeing trending in the last couple of years that we are making more gains than what what the cap provides, which is great because that means we can sustain without it. That wasn't always the case. And certainly that's something that we see other communities do to their advantage, is use that cap funding to fund projects. So that's an option. It was included in the budget for FY25 as to cover insurance payments, because we know our insurance is $100 and something thousand a year. So that's traditionally what it's offset. So if that was the choice of the council and you wanted to reallocate it and put it towards a project, it would impact the ending balance for the general fund. I don't think it would put you in the negative. It's just you're not making as many gains. Another option, and I bring this up even though I know that this has not been the desire of the council, but just so that it stays at the forefront that this is an option, and certainly in the future can become a more viable option, is that 2% fund that's committed to public works. It was estimated in FY25 budget that it'll be $113,824. So that'd be at the end of this calendar year, after we receive quarter 2 and 3 sales tax receipts and payments. That funding could be utilized as a source, and we could delay the potential early payoff for the road grader lease, though that hasn't been the desire of the council. And I wanted to put out there, because of that $113,000 and where we're sitting with the lease, that administration anticipates that the revenue needed for the remaining lease for a potential early payoff would be received by December 2025 at the earliest. I think it's going to be pretty close there, and it's probably more likely it'll be December 2026. That if we wanted to do an early payment or just save those monies and have them there for the payment, that would be paid off. And then the council will be looking at that budget, that revenue source moving forward in the budget and making a determination on how that's utilized for public works. So certainly some of these projects, if we don't receive funding or as they become more at the forefront, that'll be a great option for them. The major maintenance and repair fund is at $288,639.02 as of September 30th. However, this is not necessarily the best option because it only has $4,513 for the general fund. The rest of that major maintenance and repair fund is split out into accounts for the special revenue funds. For instance, the largest one I think is the boat haul out, and that's around $90 something thousand. So those are funds that have accumulated from those special revenue funds and should stay dedicated to those special revenue funds, unless there was a really prime example of why they would need to be reallocated to a different source. There's also the general funds unassigned fund, which is the ending fund balance. And the FY25 budget estimates that the general fund ending balance will be $132,013. However, utilizing the end of the year financial report provided by Finance Officer Yeager, I really anticipate this balance to be closer to $250,000. This will have to be verified with the FY24 audit to see where we're at audit to determine where we would be for FY25. But I think you could safely say you have about 100,000 unassigned funds that could be available for a project. However, also noting in that the general fund for the city of Seldovia was in the deficit until the end of FY23. And while you're now in the black and trending positively, the ending funding balance does not yet account for the assigned funds payable to the general fund. And that's projected at $530,006 for FY25. And you'll see those documents in the packet. I'll take them to you, take you to it in a minute. And then, as mentioned previously, the other option is you can do a wait and seek funding or match funding from other sources, and then apply for this opportunity in an upcoming year. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it this year, but of course, it's always an option for project funding. So just taking you through the rest of the packet, you'll see 28 and 29 are those updated cost estimates. And yes, they do take into account American Iron and Steel and Davis Bacon prevailing wages. And we know everything costs more to do as a government. And then on page 30 is that FY25 Community Assistance Program that the City of Seldovia is set to receive. We may have received it yet. I'll have to talk to Jan. I did submit all the documents they needed for it. And then page 31 is an overview of the reserve funds as listed in the FY25 budget. You can see that major maintenance and repair fund sitting at the $282,101 proposed at the end of FY25. And those are fairly steady of what's in there and already sitting in an account. But as I said, the general fund is only $4,513. The rest goes to water, sewer, dock, harbor, and boat haul out. Also is the 2% funds, and they're listed at the bottom at that 113,000 right now. Currently, we have about 83,000 in there. So making, about a 40,000 gain every year on top of the road grader. And then if you look at page 32 and 33, that's that general fund budget for FY25. And I'm just pointing out the ending fund balance. If you look at the net effect at the bottom, and you have to actually, let's see here, have to turn to page 33. You can see the anticipated ending fund balance. And while it says 132, I meant to say that for FY24, we anticipate that to be closer to 250,000, not for FY25. So FY25 would be even more than that, but we won't have those figures until the audit is complete. And that gives you, that continues to make gains on these assigned funds, which are listed in the blue below that. You can see the MMRF, the fuel retail fund that was just started in FY25, sales tax for public works, that 2% is in there. Seldovia permanent fund, a portion of it, the 50,000 for the police public safety reserve fund that was started in FY25, other funds for Lake Susan and vehicle replacement. So I also included the the PowerPoint from the last meeting, and I'm open for questions, but that's just kind of a summary of, should you guys desire to submit a project where you could look at some match funding options.
Okay, thank you, Heidi. All right, we'll go ahead and open it up to council on what, some initial thoughts, I guess, on what we want to do here.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for all that. It was not too much, Heidi. It was good. It's good to have all the info. After looking at where we would get all those funds if they don't come from other grant sources and looking at these two project narratives, I would say, I think we should submit something, but I think we should submit something more on the minimal side if we're going to be taking funds out of our budget, just because of where we are. I'm I'm on that conservative side of making sure that just because we feel like we have money there that we can start to use, that we don't just start grabbing it. But when it's for something like we had kind of all agreed that like the roof needs to be done on the fuel and lube, we know that that's like a pressing matter. Where some of these other pieces of the project, siding on this building, even siding on the fuel and lube, even though it's needed, like looking at what's more of like an emergency or almost an emergency project and starting there if we're not getting funding from a grant, if we're pulling it from our budget. And if we pull it out of our budget, I like the idea. It's doesn't matter where we pull it, the bottom line still is going to look the same, but out of good practice, I like the idea of utilizing the funds. I forget what you called them, Heidi, that we're not supposed to be depending on in our budget.
The community assistance program.
Assistance funds. So in our and for me, it's in my mind. For them, it's on the paper. Taking the fund that out of those funds so that we start to get in that practice. So it would be a good practice all around, but maybe not all of them to start. So that's my my thought.
Okay, thank you, Ashley.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, go ahead, Vivian. Yep.
Okay, sorry. I would definitely agree with what Ashley said. I think the one area that we can draw money to have a matching is the community assistance program, because we did over years and years decide that we weren't going to use it in our budget. So this is a funding that's available. I'm very leery of using the 2% greater tax money that we're getting, using that for matching funds. And I agree that both the programs should be narrowed down to what's necessary, what's structurally necessary for these buildings. I think that's a good avenue to go. And it is frightening because we have, after a long time, the city is finally in the black. And I hate to see us go backwards again. We fought pretty hard to get where we are right now. I'm very proud of that. So I think we need to be very conservative and conscientious of where we're going with this. But using the funds that are available that could be used as far as the community assistance program is one that can be used. But again, that's kind of where I'm coming from. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Yeah, no, I agree with kind of along the lines of what you and Ashley are both saying. I think it's the CAP funding for me, the CAP funding makes perfect sense to use that as a match. And I agree. I don't want to dig too deep if we do get a project and have to, start coming up with a whole bunch of cash out of our budget. I'm definitely not in favor of utilizing any of the 2% out of the public works money right now, because I do want to see us pay off that grader, and then I'd like to just continue on with getting rid of the rest of the derelict equipment and getting our entire fleet upgraded for the next 25 years here. So while we've got the opportunity to do that, so yeah, I think whatever we submit here, it needs to be something that's very, very achievable and doesn't break the bank. So I do like the idea of just limiting, like on the energy project up there for, prioritize if it's the roof and insulation, maybe it's the roof and windows, but just making it reasonable. The roof seems like the most likely one because we got to stop the water. So that before you do anything, you got to stop the water. So, John, then we'll go to Harmony. John?
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh, yeah.
I am just thrilled to hear that everybody's kind of leaning on the conservative side. I'm with you on 90% of everything you guys mentioned. I just hate to see us start dipping in and spending money like crazy until we see how the next couple of years goes. And the same thing with the fuel and lube project. I agree. We start with the roof and the main priority stuff, and then go from there.
That's it. This is where we're at. I'll meet you there.
Okay, thanks, John. Harmony?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with the general tone of the conversation. That's all the comments that have come across this evening have made sense, so I haven't felt the need to jump in. I do just have a clarification question regarding that 2% tax. I was under the understanding that that tax cannot be that money cannot be allocated outside of that greater payment until that greater is paid off. Am I correct? Because of how that tax was enacted. Am I incorrect on that? I mean, I don't want to spend it. I just want to make sure I'm better informed.
Go ahead, Heidi, if you want to offer the recap on that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry if
No.
I'm asking a
No,
redundant
you're
question.
good. Nope, all good.
So we did have legal look into this and we have had this discussion, and it was determined that the way that the proposition was written, that the determination on how and when that money was spent on public works was a determination of the city council. So yes, the initial proposition or the initial request in the proposition is to make the greater payment, the least greater payment, but it doesn't address that additional funds need to either be A, saved, or B, can be utilized and allocated to public works within the year. It doesn't address that timing issue. Does it need for the whole greater to be paid off or just for the year? So in having that discussion on the council level, the council has made the determination for the last couple of years that they continue to put that money aside and save it for the greater payment, and have that be the focus as greater payment first. And then once the greater is paid off, it can be utilized for other public works projects. However, that is at a determination of the council if you guys want to change it at any time.
Okay, thank you. I remembered as soon as you started talking. Sorry, I'm such a guppy as a mother of four. I think that I continue to stand on that same premise that the way we put that out to I apologize. The way we put that out to the public, I think that we should stay the course on not spending that monies outside of unnecessarily. Anyways, I agree with the general tone of the conversation. You guys are great.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Meg, I see you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, first just wanted to say thanks, Ashley, for just kind of putting it out there in the meeting. And I am also with the majority. It makes sense. And yeah, it all sound pretty good. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Meg.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Yep, go ahead.
I did have the opportunity to do just a quick search, and it looks like, and I will confirm again, but it does look like from Google that the state or local government sources, as well as state appropriations, federal appropriations, and local sources can be used to match CDBG funds. So that is an option if you guys wanted to do a portion of the project here and then the other portion as a state and federal request and split it.
Mr. Mayor, if I may make a
Yep.
proposal.
Yep, go ahead.
As my wheels are spinning, knowing that, what I was going to propose is looking at what half of that community funding is that we have. Sorry, can't remember what the whole thing is. Cap, looking at cap and looking at what half of that would be, keeping half of it as our budget buffer. That's how we view it and wherever it needs to go. And then utilizing that number to whittle down projects on the fuel loop, because I think that is the one that's got the more pressing projects right now. Multipurpose building has gotten some of its pressing stuff done. And using that as a way of being what our max 25% match could be for the CDBG. And then the remainder of the projects on that building, just so we can try to have a finished project, because I think that's something that's great, to put that into yes, thank you.
Okay, so I was trying to stay one step ahead of you there. So the Yeah, so that leaves you with about, I think, Heidi, correct me if I'm wrong, it leaves you with about 39,000. It would be half of the 78. And that was for this year's, or that was based on last year's, Heidi?
That's this year. So this year's
Okay. So
budgeted funds.
half of that would be 39, and then that would put you at about 150 grand. Let's see, 150 times 0.25 is 37.5 on the match. So you've got, yeah, roughly, yeah, so you would have about 150 grand that you would have to work off of, I believe, to submit on that.
And then through the mayor, if you're doing that, and I can work on it this week, what you could do is that state and federal request could include the additional portion of the project, but could also still include that matching piece just in case you get it, then you don't have to use that half of the cap. But you know that half of the cap is there for the CDBG
I
if
like
needed.
that. It's insurance.
Yeah.
Yep, I
Double
agree.
plan. I love
think
it.
that makes sense.
Okay, so if that works with the council, that can be my marching orders is I will work that project description out into phases. And so that we can have a viable project request for the CDBG with a 25% match of about 39,000 from the city. And then put the remainder of that project, including that 25% in on the state and federal appropriations request.
Yeah, and the reason, just to reiterate, I like Ashley's proposal because, yeah, at the end of the day, I'm sure we're going to get another increase on our insurance this year if the trend is going to continue like it has. So, yeah, at the end of the day, we're going to have some unforeseen increases, I'm sure, to our FY 26 budget when we start that process.
Insurance on our insurance.
Yep, amongst other things, I'm sure. Okay, everybody good on council with Heidi reworking that project into phases and then splitting the two up between CBDG and the state and federal appropriations?
I'm good.
I'm in favor of that.
Okay, Heidi, you're good with that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, that sounds good. Let's see. All right, that's good. Appreciate everyone's discussion on that. Comments to the audience. Do we have anybody signed up, Liz, online or in the building that wants to comment on tonight's topics?
We have nobody signed up online, Mr. Mayor. And I'm not sure, do we have any comments from the room? Would you like to make comments? Okay.
Okay. If we are good on that, then we'll give everybody about an extra 8 minutes of their time here. And then that way we can get started on time tonight for our regular meeting here in about 20 minutes.
Mayor Campbell, are we starting on the same link here?
Yeah, Heidi, will be on the same link.
We can keep the same link.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. If there's no additional comments, then we will go ahead and adjourn the work session. And we'll rejoin back here in about 15 minutes and get started on time at 6 o'clock with the regular meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you shortly.